What's up guys, and welcome back to today's video. Today we are answering the very common dreaded issue of the skinny fat physique, and I totally feel you 1000%, but I think I have some very nice recommendations for you on how you can fix this. There can be numerous causes on why someone can end up skinny fat. And what do? Do you bulk? Do you cut? What the heck? Let's get into it. Firstly, someone that's skinny fat is basically someone who does not have a lot of muscle mass, but does have significant amount of fat stores. And skinny fat is basically as well the living proof that the classic body types of ectomorph, mesomorph and endomorph are basically bullshit. Because ectomorph is basically someone that's just skinny, and you have mesomorph, and that's basically someone that looks like Batman, he's jacked and he's pretty ripped. And then you have endomorph, which is basically someone that's fat but does have a bunch of muscle mass underneath. Skinny fat is the other one, and somehow they forgot about that one. And the first thing we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to set a concrete goal. Most people would describe their goal as I wanna be athletic, I wanna have a lean physique, I wanna feel good in my own body. Those are very broad terms, and it doesn't give you a lot of clarity on what you really should be doing. Science shows that if you can make your goal more measurable, more clear and concrete, then the chances of you reaching them are going to be significantly higher. So let's see if we can just make a concrete goal out of this. First thing we're going to do is we're going to have to estimate what our starting point is going to be. Now, most likely you're going to be somewhere here at approximately 20%. What is like our ideal physique? What kind of shape would that be? And that would be like 10 to 12%-ish, most likely for most people. This is like the beach physique, the physique that women like most. Most people want to have a body fat percentage of around 10 to 12%. And where are we at right now? That's most likely gonna be somewhere at around 20%. Let's say it's 20, to go from 20 to 10 to 12%, keeping all the muscle mass you currently have, that would be an approximate fat loss of like 15 kg, I would say. Alright, and then a lot of people find it very hard to determine how many muscle they would want to put on. So let's say you're 90 kg, and then we would just get rid of all the fat, keep all the muscle, everything, just literally take the water weight, because you lose some water weight as well. Take the water weight and the fat weight off. You would be here at like 75. Then you could ask yourself, alright, is that like a weight that I would feel comfortable at, or would I prefer to be like a little bit heavier? And most of the times people would want to add an additional 10 kg of muscle mass and get rid of 10 kg fat. That's a very common thing I hear. It might just resonate pretty well with you as well. So then the goal would be minus 15 kg fat loss to get to here, and then plus 10 kg to be kind of at a weight where you would be like, that would be pretty solid. And if you would lose 15 kg fat and get to this shape, plus add an additional 10 kg muscle, then you'll really have a very good, solid, ripped and pretty damn muscular physique. Now we have a bit of a concrete goal. That gives a lot of clarity of like, okay, what do I actually have to do? What path do I have to lay down in order to get there? Are we gonna bulk? Are we gonna cut? What's going to be the best route? First thing that's really gonna help is understanding when one should ideally start a bulk and when one should ideally start a cut. And the best starting point for a bulk is at 6 to 7%. However, that's a kind of body fat percentage that's not very interesting for most people. It's more something for competitors, and your life is going to be as interesting as a wet sock if you would be there, because you just have to live like a monk. You have low energy. It just sucks. This is kind of what most people like, the 10 to 12% range. So we're gonna set our little altered version of that to 8, maybe even like 10%. That would be the ideal starting point for a bulk for people who are not competitive bodybuilders. What would be the ideal starting point for a cut? And that would be 15% body fat. So if you're higher, you never want to start bulking, all right? Now, so there's kind of like a highway in between you would want to operate. So a starting point would be 8 to 12% over here. And then the starting point where you want to start cutting would be 15%. And there's two reasons why you don't want to bulk further than 15%. And reason one, your physique is just gonna start looking like crap. For fitness people standards, you would just be fat. Muscle and fat, or skinny fat, or just fat, it doesn't matter. In all those cases, you're fat, right? So we don't want that. We're gonna look like crap even if we have muscle mass. And second is, testosterone decreases from 15% onwards. Testosterone is very important for your muscle building potential. The more testosterone you have, the more muscle protein synthesis you'll have, aka the amount of muscle you can build from the proteins you are consuming. So if you would be in a calorie surplus and you would continue to bulk, you would just put on more fat because of your suboptimal testosterone levels. And the second thing is that nutrient partitioning becomes suboptimal as well. Basically meaning someone who's at 20% body fat, he relatively has bigger fat cells than someone who's at 10 to 12%. And basically all the food you are consuming is being digested into the bloodstream and goes into all the cells that you have within your body. And the higher your body fat percentage is, relatively more of that energy is going to go into those fat stores. So it's also going to increase relatively more than when you're leaner. You would just put on more fat than when you would be like 10 to 12%, because more of that energy goes into those fat cells. So it's literally exponentially going to become more. These two reasons are very important why you do not want to exceed and extend your bulk after 15%. So that would be the ideal cutting point. 8 to 12%. You would start a bulk, ideally 9 months. And then after 9 months, you would end up at 15%, and then you would start cutting again for approximately 3 months from this body fat percentage to end up here again. Then you spend the most amount of time in a calorie surplus in a year, which is also the best for muscle building. But most people, they're just kind of operating somewhere in this range. They're above 15%, it's September, it's like, yo, I'm gonna start bulking, but the testosterone levels are suboptimal, the nutrition partitioning is suboptimal, and they don't really following a good concrete plan, and then they just end up getting more and more fat, and they end up being here, and then they just lose the fat. It's just, they're just somewhere operating right here, but we want to go right there. Since we're skinny fat, we can basically go into one of two directions. And the first thing we can do is we can either cut down to 10% body fat, which would require a calorie deficit. The second thing we could do is we could recomp our way into a better physique, which basically would mean eating at calorie maintenance or even at a very slight deficit of approximately 5%. Now there's pros and cons to each of them. The pro of taking the cutting approach is that you build more progress over time, taking the route of cutting and bulking, because you lose fat faster in a calorie deficit and you build muscle faster in a surplus. So let's say you would cut and bulk for like a year time versus maintenance or recomping for a year time, you'll have more significant progress taking the cutting and bulking route. However, there's one little additional downside to that. If you cut down first to 10%, because you don't have a substantial amount of muscle mass yet, then you will likely have to end up at the end of the cut at being skinny. And a lot of people don't really like that because they don't want to be skinny. You can prevent that by taking the recomp approach. So the pro of the recomp, you don't end up being skinny first, but the con is that your progress is just going to take a lot longer. So it's like, are you able to take one step backwards to become a bit skinny in order to make 4 basically forward, or would you rather just don't take one back and just make 2 steps forward? Just a matter of personal preference. There is, however, one method in which you can take on the cutting down approach without ending up being skinny. And that's simply by doing everything so incredibly well that you build a shit ton of muscle as well in the process. That is only possible if you're really following a very good concrete approach that is tailored around your unique situation. And it's kind of only doable if you're following a plan made up by a very good coach. So someone who gives you all the support, all the tools, all the knowledge to succeed. So you literally do everything near perfectly. Some results that you can expect by taking the cutting route, but doing everything near perfectly with a very good, personalized, concrete, science-based approach. So this right here is a 1-year transformation. Maybe not totally skinny fat, maybe a little bit jacked with some fat, but this is a substantial amount of muscle mass that he has put on to get from here to there while getting super diced. Here, same as well, bit skinny fat situation to bigger and extremely lean as well. If you keep the same amount of size, like let's say your sleeves would fill out the same, with a much lower body fat percentage, then you've put on a shit ton of muscle mass, because otherwise you would end up being skinny and the sleeves wouldn't fit so tight anymore. So this is what you can expect. This is what's really realistic and doable if you follow a personalized, concrete, science-based approach. To be honest, how many people do you really see transforming the way this young gentleman did, for example? Barely no one, right? If you really observe objectively in a gym and look around, insane transformation. He really made more results in 1 year than others would in maybe 10 years that go consistently. That's really the power of doing everything right, evidence-based, with a solid, concrete approach, because it's basically essentially just physics. This entire game is physics, the laws of thermodynamics, all the muscle building principles. If you apply all that knowledge and all that sort of good stuff efficiently and effectively, then you can make an insane amount of results within 1 year, more than others in 10 years. All right, let's dive into how you could go about that, taking a cutting and bulking route without ending up skinny, doing something like this yourself. Creating your initial starting plan. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna have to set up your nutrition. And 1.1.1 is your caloric intake. That's always the first thing you're doing. Every program setup, every program development always follows this structure. And we start with nutrition, starting with the caloric intake. To estimate how many calories you need, you could use the Catch and McCardle formula. You could literally just Google it. It's everywhere to be found. Fill out your stats, see what your caloric maintenance is, and from that on we are going to the next point, which is calculating your amount of calorie deficit, right? And for most of us, if you're like 20% body fat, for example, or 15%, you could use a 20% deficit. So maintenance intake is 100%, and you want to have a reduction of 20%. All right, and if you're obese, you could aim to go for 30 to 40%. And you just want to make sure that you always stay on that wavelength. Protein intake is going to be 1.8 grams per kg of body weight in pounds. Take this amount, 1.8 times 2.2, and fats 1 gram per kg body weight as well. Doesn't matter if it's more. If it's more, then do it at the expense of carbs, so those can vary a little bit, but keep the proteins fixed and try not to go below 1 gram of fat. All right, the remaining calories are going to be carbs, and an additional bonus point would be to eat 1 gram of carbs per kg body weight as a pre-workout meal 90 minutes prior to the session. Still want to hit the proteins as well, and a minimum amount of fats, but it's important to hit 1 gram of carbs, because carbs are primarily an energy source, and they will ensure that you have enough fuel, enough energy to improve your performance, because if you're getting weaker, you're 100% over time going to be guaranteed to lose muscle mass. This bonus tip is going to massively help preventing that. So that's nutrition. That's going to be enough. You can add additional steps, but it's not going to be necessary for someone who's a beginner. And again, why can we put on almost the same amount of muscle mass cutting compared to bulking at this point? And that's because when it comes to the level of advancement, we are still basically a beginner. And because you're in the beginning stage, you hardly have any diminishing returns as one would have when you're super advanced, which basically allows you to almost have the same amount of muscle building potential. But that's only gonna happen if you're following a good, concrete approach. This bonus tip is gonna help, because if you get stronger weekly, you'll put on great results. Stronger every session, even better. If you're getting weaker, you're gonna lose muscle mass. Next thing is we're going to create the initial training program setup. And the first thing you're always going to be doing is set up your split, which means how many times per week am I going to be training? Keep in mind that 3 times per week is always better than sometimes 3 or sometimes 4. So basically pick the highest frequency that you can always stick to no matter what. And if it's going to be 3 times per week, then you want to hit either a full body program, or an upper-lower full body program, or half body, full body. Half body would mean your entire front body, for example, and then on the other day, the entire back. And then you would hit everything 2 times per week. That's something you want to do. Every muscle group at least twice per week. If you're hitting it once, a lot of people do that, who are in this situation, cut it out. Keep these rules in mind, follow these rules, and make something that's a lot more optimal. Much more results that way. Now, if you're going to be training 4 times per week, then it's going to be upper, lower, or half body. 5 times per week, push-pull legs, upper lower, or push pull legs, half body, half body. 6 times per week is not recommended. Reason being is because it's not really so much a matter of how many times per week you should go to the gym, but it's more a matter of hitting the optimal amount of volume per muscle group for you. And a lot of things go into that: level of advancement, a whole bunch of lifestyle factors. And if you take all those things into consideration, then you really don't need to hit 6 times per week in order to get all that volume done, because it's going to be on the lower end. Someone who's going to be more advanced is going to be able to hit a lot more sets per week and still recover from it. And so for us, 3 to 5 times is going to be fine right now. Don't hit 6 times. Most people who go 6 times, they're overtraining, and then they're just getting weaker, and they're just wasting a whole bunch of time without getting any results in return for it. You've set up your calories, your nutrition plan is kind of set up the guidelines, created your initial training program when it comes to the split setup, which kind of muscle groups you're gonna hit when it comes to upper, lower, etc., push, pull legs. The last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna fill out exercises within these days. Okay, and you want to stick to those exercises for a minimum of 20 weeks. Don't change it unless there are some issues. So if there's no issues, keep doing it for at least 20 weeks. If it's still going very well, you're still getting stronger, no pains, no nothing, you can still keep doing those exercises. Plan is set up, now it's time for action. And we're starting out with a technique optimization phase. What you want to do is you want to record yourself, because more often than not, you think you're doing everything correctly, you think you're hitting the right tempo, you're thinking you're doing all the cues, everything perfectly, until you record yourself and you watch it back and you're like, that's not quite what I thought it was. So really record yourself to see what you have to improve, and focus on all the right cues of the exercises you have selected and make that form perfect. It's the best progressive overload you can basically apply. Performing the exercise is not the goal. The goal is to stimulate that muscle as optimally as possible, and the exercise is only a tool to do it. So the best progressive overload you can do is just improving your technique. That's going to be the best bang for your buck. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to train in the 15 to 18 rep range. And you might say, isn't that too much? Isn't 8 to 12 the most optimal range? Muscle basically grows within 3 to 40 reps. It doesn't matter, as long as you perform better than last time with the perfect form, you're gonna make the same amount of muscle mass in a 20 rep range compared to like a 10 rep range. All right, but why this rep range? Because it really ensures that we can focus on making that form, making that technique fully perfect. And what we want to do in addition is have a 3-second eccentric, so the lengthening part of the muscle has to go in 3 seconds. Record yourself, because you're probably going to go faster than you think you are, with a 1-second hold at the bottom. Forget about the weight, fully focus on implementing all those cues correctly, and just hit the muscle until failure. Training to failure is also more important in the higher rep range because of various reasons, so you want to do that. But just hit failure by focusing on all the cues with time under tension, everything perfectly. If you keep doing that, eventually your muscle's gonna soak and cramp, and it's gonna be the most effective set you've ever done. If you can't perform a set with perfect execution in the 15 to 18 rep range, there's no point of going lower, because lower rep ranges, the benefit of that is that you hit failure faster, the set takes less long, it's mentally less hard to do. But the downside is with low reps is that your form, your technique is gonna crank down pretty quickly. So you wanna ensure that you can do it first perfectly with high reps before you taper down to lower reps. Once that's done, that's when we're gonna move into the second phase, the performance phase. And in this phase, we're really gonna start focusing on progressing in all the selected exercises. And automatically, in an auto-regulated way, the rep range is also gonna go lower, because you're gonna increase the weight, increase the amount of reps, all that stuff. It doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you are performing better than last time, maintaining perfect form, you're gonna put on size. And by doing that, you'll, over the weeks, just get rid of some reps here and there, and you'll automatically end up in something like an 8 to 12 rep range. That's how you want to approach that. So you want to either increase the weight, reps, or training density, which means fewer rest time, and keep the perfect technique. Keep that perfect, because that's always going to be the best progressive overload. Simply adding more weight at the expense of form is less stimulus on the muscle, which is less effective. Weight is just a tool as well. The goal is to stimulate the muscle. And if you're not getting stronger each session, then the first thing you want to look at is improve recovery factors. Can you do something within your recovery to speed up recovery so you're more recovered before the next training session? If you did that, that's not the cause and the solution, then you want to evaluate your form. Am I hitting everything as perfectly as I possibly can to stimulate the right muscle breakdown in order to stimulate muscle protein synthesis and the right recovery, etc. If that is perfect, okay, then look into your training intensity. Are you training hard enough? Are you pushing hard enough in each set? Are you at least 2 reps short of failure, or 1 rep, or just hitting true muscular failure? Yes? Okay. Then 4, reduce 2 sets per muscle group per week. You can be a lot more meticulous about these, but it's very hard to calculate. This is going to be the best bang for your buck, as concise and as actionable as possible without the most calculations. Just reduce 2 sets per muscle group per week. See if that solved the issue. If it didn't, reduce it again until you get to a point where you notice, hey, I'm just recovering barely enough in time for the next session to still get stronger each time. As long as you stick to your training and your nutrition plan, keep that perfect deficit, lose about half a kg to 1 kg per week while still getting stronger, it's going to be a matter of time until you got rid of the skinny fat problem. All right? After 20 weeks, you might experience some diet fatigue. And how do you know if you have diet fatigue? If you just can't stop thinking about food the entire day, and if your portion size that you can eat are basically of an entire family, those are kind of signs that you're having diet fatigue, and if you really can't stick to your caloric target anymore. Now, if that is the case, then you could go back to maintenance for 1 to 4 weeks until you just feel normal again. Normal as always, you're not constantly thinking about food. Food portions are a bit back to normal. You can't eat 4 pizzas in one go and those kind of stuff. So once that's kind of recovered, dive back into the deficit, repeat the cycle until you've reached 10 to 12% body fat. And by that time, the skinny fat problem should have been solved. They should be lean with a substantial, decent amount of muscle mass, not be skinny. If you end up skinny, you did something wrong. If executed correctly, you should have gained at least 5 kg of muscle as well in the process. And again, you could be a lot more meticulous about this, but this video is just really as concise, as straight to the point with all the actionable stuff you need to be doing, a complete roadmap in a science-based way to fix it. If you notice that, hey, this information is really the real deal, this is none of that bullshit nonsense that I see coming across on Instagram and other platforms, this is really concise, science-based, proven stuff that's going to help me transform as those 2 other gentlemen did. If you recognize that, I would appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. If you want to know more about how to develop an insane physique, check out, for example, my previous video, which you can check out right here, on how to get the summer body as quickly as possible. A lot of additional valuable tips in there. Now, if you're struggling with this and you might want some additional help on reaching insane results as those 2 gentlemen did, check out the link in my bio, then we can schedule a one-on-one strategy meeting consultation in which we together can set up a plan for you to reach similar results like that through my support, knowledge, and coaching. If not, I hope you really like this video, utilize these tips, want to know how you're doing, hope you hit your dream physique, and I'll see you in the next video.